Shabbat Shalom, everyone. You may be seated. My parents of blessed memory had a favorite Yiddish phrase that I will translate into English for all of you. Humans plan and God laughs. And for the last 6 weeks, I have planned to deliver a different sermon each Shabbat. And then the events of the world, sadly, have forced me to speak about them as opposed to what I had intended to speak about. And I can see God and my parents laughing again today. I believe it was Vladimir Lenin who once said that there are decades when nothing happens, and then there are weeks when decades happen. And this seems to be one of those weeks. There is a lot to say about the situation with Israel and Iran, and it will be impossible to distill it all into a handful of minutes here now. I will try to pull apart some of the salient pieces and things that we can think about and consider, and this will be ongoing as best as I can. So in no particular order, I will share with you. The first thing is that inevitably, starting as soon as we enter that room for Kiddush, there will be people in this crowd and around North America and synagogues who have miraculously been declassified and shared with high-level intelligence information and will tell you all of the things that have happened and not happened and what's going to happen because they are in the know. They know more than most. It's ridiculous. The first thing I would say is that it's incumbent upon us to do some pausing and some listening, and not to be overly haughty. That's number one. Let's say what we do know. If you ask me, an incredible miracle happened in the last few days. Here's the first miracle. The first miracle was that Jews kept a secret for 20 years. Because there were levels of detail and intricacy that happened that we know about, that has been declassified and has been shared, that clearly were in the making for 20 years and executed on in the perfect storm. And no one seemed to know anything about it. No one. What we do know is that clearly Israel, and when I say Israel here, I am referring to Israel, to the IDF, to its leadership, to different Knesset leadership and members, to the IAF, which is the Air Force, and in particular the Mossad. Israel was able to infiltrate into Tehran to the point where they, in essence, created an Air Force base made of drones in Tehran and launched it from Tehran in coordination with the attacks that happened on Thursday night. There was pinpoint accuracy. And what I explained to my son was, it's tantamount to picking a fight with someone, and what Israel did is not say, I'm going to beat you up. What they did is they tied the hands of Tehran, and then they stapled their feet to the ground, and then they said, we're going to beat you up, and they did. Because the first things that they did were they took out all of the major forms of retaliation that Israel was anticipating, which were stockpiles of ballistic missiles, drone factories, SAMs, which stand for surface-to-air missiles, and they took out most of the launch sites that these missiles need in order to take off. That was the first thing that happened with over 200 aircraft from Israel. The second thing they did after those were decapitated was they then took out the leadership in a very focused way. If you see the buildings that were targeted in Iran, what you will see are floors in the middle of buildings that were taken out, but not buildings themselves. And if you're wondering, why didn't we take out the building themselves? We could. It's not a hard feat. In fact, it's much easier. This is the difference between a butcher and a surgeon. But we were surgical, and we were only after those who were the nuclear scientists who were furthering the enrichment of uranium, and those who were responsible for not only the mantras of death to Jews in Israel and America for that matter, but those who were part of the IRGC and leading in terror. After that was completed, we began what was the first of what will be a few days, if not weeks, of sorties that are focusing on the enrichment of uranium in Iran. From all accounts that we've seen, this miracle dwarfs the miracle of 1967. And I imagine this is how my ancestors must have felt in 1967. And I've noticed something that I haven't noticed in the last almost 2 years and 20 months. There's a little bit of swagger back in the Jew. In 1967, after the Six-Day War, is when people started wearing yarmulkes publicly. At JTS, where I was trained, and this is before I was born, in 1967, the head rabbis of JTS, we're talking Finkelstein and Lieberman and others, would walk up and down the street with hats, and they would never wear their yarmulke in public. And after 67, people were proud to be Jewish, and they stuck up their chest a little bit more. And that's what began this concept that we even have today of that Jewish pride. And in the last 48 hours, we have seen something that has been pretty incredible on that front. And maybe it's just a matter of time. Maybe it's some crazies that will come out soon. Maybe it's only been since Thursday. But what I have noticed is a little bit of that comfort, that swagger, that bravado that has come back. And maybe we needed it. And maybe it will tamp down some of that anti-Semitism. Because let's bear in mind that Germany, UK, came out with celebration and appreciation for Israel's right to defend itself, which in this climate, I'll take a statement like that. Saudi Arabia and UAE were silent, which in this climate, I'll take a celebration like that. And I think there are a lot of people who are sharing in their parts of the world. Thank God for Israel for, again, doing our dirty work and saving us from what is a very imminent danger. And for those of you that think it wasn't an imminent danger, I just bring you to the IAEA, which earlier this week sanctioned Iran for breaking all of its rules of non-proliferation. Every member of the IAEA voted to condemn and sanction Iran for continuing to enrich uranium and continue its proliferation, except for 3 countries. One, I don't even remember, it was so obscure, and of course, China and Russia. So for anyone who thinks that Israel was acting only out of its own interests and alone, just look at the world opinion on this matter. Here's the second thing that I think we all need to take pause and consider. And I'm a rabbi, which means I've been trained to tell you important lessons through stories. So here's a small story. It's a story of a farmer who has a horse that was trusted and worked the plow for him every single day. And one day, that horse ran away. And all the townspeople came to the farmer and said, "That's so terrible. Your horse ran away. You have no one to pull your plow." And this farmer was incredibly wise, and he said, "We will see." And 2 days later, the horse came back to the farmer, but this time he brought 10 other stray horses. And now he has taken his workforce times 10. And all of the townspeople said, "Oh, look how lucky you are. You've increased your workforce 10x just because they were all stray horses and your horse brought them back." And the wise farmer said, "We'll see." And the boy got on one of those stray horses and started riding around to see how he could break it in. And the horse bucked the boy off and broke his leg. And all the townspeople came around and said, "This is so terrible. Your son broke his leg on one of the horses." And the wise farmer said, "We will see." And then a few days later, a war broke out in the community. And they came around to conscribe all of the young men of fighting age. And they would have taken this boy, but they saw that his leg was broken and couldn't fight, so they passed him over. And all of the people of the town said, "How lucky you are that your son's leg was broken and he's not needed for war." And the farmer said, "We will see." It's really, really hard to figure out where in that story we are. And we are a people, and I have thought about this concept for a very long time, that are defined by two moments in time. The example that I always give, which I'm about to give you, are representative of who we are as a people. But the two moments in time could fit into any paradigm that I'm going to give you. Any paradigm. The example that I always give is we are a people of Munich and Entebbe. Munich was 1972, Entebbe was 1976. And I contend Entebbe only happened because of Munich. As a quick primer, for those of you who don't remember or weren't around, in 1972, a group of terrorists infiltrated the Munich Olympics, and they killed 11 Israeli athletes. And Israel ceded the interference of what was going to be a commando unit to come and recapture what was eventually the plane and those people that they were holding hostage, and they ceded it to the Germans. The Germans backed out at the last minute, and all the hostages died. It was never spoken. There are no transcripts that say what I'm about to say, but the unspoken word of the Israeli leadership at the time was, when we cede our fate to that of other lands, we will die. So in 1976, when a plane was hijacked and taken to Entebbe, Uganda, Israel said, we're not going to rely on the Ugandans to save our people. We will do so. And we had a miracle, and we saved them. But we are defined as a people between those two moments. And those two moments aren't limited to those two moments. There are dozens of moments that are just like that. And I would say that this moment in time never would have happened, and also never could have happened, were it not for October the 7th. October the 7th was Munich on steroids. It was probably the worst time in modern history in the last 80 years for the Jewish people. It was a time when we were decimated, caught off guard, asleep at the wheel. And what is so ironic reminds me very much of the Purim story. What Hamas, and when I say Hamas, I'm not only referring to Hamas, I'm also referring to, of course, their sponsor, Iran. What they were trying to prove was that Israel was really just a paper tiger. There was no teeth in its bite. There was no fierceness. And October 7th proved that. October 7th said, there's no coordination, they are not strong, look what we were able to do. For the first time in Israel's history, we lost sovereignty of our land. Now, granted, it was for 3 days, but we lost sovereignty of our land. We did not have control of our own land at that time. For the first time in Israel's history, they forced people out of the north to the amount of almost 100,000 people for over a year because of the actions of Hezbollah. It was for sure a Munich moment. It reminded me in the Purim story of when Haman said, I'm going to build the gallows of where I will kill all of the Jews. And then what ends up happening? Haman and his 10 sons are hung on those very same gallows. Where else did that happen? In Auschwitz, where the commandant of Auschwitz was hung on the very gallows that he used to hang Jews outside of his home. And he was hung right in Auschwitz, in Auschwitz, Poland. So I say that story because what country turned out to really be the paper tiger? Iran. Iran was absolutely defanged. Israel is now able to fly over Iranian airspace unfettered, without any inhibitions. Now, that didn't happen just by accident. There was a perfect storm. That perfect storm was the horrible atrocities of October the 7th. The second part of that perfect storm was Hezbollah and the pager operation that basically and miraculously took out all of its leaders, and then the very focused attack afterwards that defanged Hezbollah. And the fall of Bashar Assad in Syria and Israel immediately, not passing go, within hours of Bashar Assad falling, attacked all of the military installations and took 65 years worth of a military of serious concern and worry and decimated it in 5 days. That's what Israel did. But the second thing they did was they stopped the traffic of incoming weaponry from Iran that would tunnel right through to Syria, into Lebanon, and they cleared a pathway for them to fly through Syria and attack Iran. which is indeed what happened. Now, I am late to the party, and I'm really into podcasts now. I should say some podcasts. I listen to about 3 pretty religiously. And one that I listen to all the time is Dan Senor. And Dan Senor's podcast this past week was with my teacher and my dear friend Tal Becker. And the title of the podcast was, "What Does a Win Look Like?" Meaning, what will victory look like? It's very hard to define. Even Tal, who has a PhD in this and has written the Abraham Accords and the peace accords that happened and the ceasefires that happened in Lebanon and all these other places that he's been focused on, he had a hard time articulating what does victory look like. And I have an answer for Tal, and I'll tell him, please God, when I'm able to see him. You want to know what victory looks like? It looks like Hezbollah, which was created for this moment in time. Hezbollah, which we were confident would rain down 100,000 missiles should we ever try and attack Iran. Hezbollah that is sworn to the destruction of Israel as an entity and the eradication of the Jewish people. That Hezbollah would say unequivocally within 24 hours of the attack on Iran, we're sitting this one out. We will have nothing to do with this conflict or this war. You want to know what victory looks like? That's what it looks like. That's what victory looks like. And you cannot say that we are victorious then. It's almost like the wise farmer saying, we will see, because it takes serious time for us to figure out what that victory looks like. And trust me, there will be other cyclical events. There will be other repercussions. There will be other things that happen. If Iran is silly enough to attack American interests in the region, I believe that President Trump will give the go-ahead for allowing some of the bombers that America has access to that Israel doesn't, including the B-52 and the Stealth, to attack Fordo with its bunker-busting technology, which will allow us to take out the last standing uranium enrichment site in Iran. And I hope, in a strange way, that Iran does that. Now, I don't want any American to be in harm or danger. That's not what I'm hoping for. I don't want anyone to misconstrue my words. But I hope that that's a way that will draw us in to finish the job, because we cannot leave any oxygen in the air of Iran. And the second thing that I think is mission critical here, and I think has been quite clear, is that Israel is more than interested in terminating the uranium enrichment program in Iran. That seems to be a short-term solution. What they're more interested in is terminating the enrichment program and overthrowing the Islamic terrorist regime. I highly encourage you to either read the book or watch the miniseries called The Ghosts of Beirut. It's the story of Radwan. And Radwan, who was trained in Iran and part of the Islamic Revolution, who came over to Beirut in 1981, 2 years after the revolution, and basically was the one who invented the notion of suicide bombing, which was against Islamic rule. But he manipulated the rule and said, if you're doing it for this cause, it has to be accessible, it has to be permitted and okay. And the first bombing was at the Marine barracks in Beirut. And it was there in Beirut when the PLO got their stronghold that Israel went in and stayed for almost 20 years. All of this stemmed from the radicalization of the Iranian regime, the IRGC, and a regime that doesn't represent its population whatsoever. More than 80% of the population of Iran does not want its current leadership. And I believe part of what Israel is trying to do is to decimate the economy, which will lead to the overthrow of the regime. And hopefully in the overthrow of the regime, what it will create is a new possibility for Iran. Just another reminder for people who might be younger in the group. In 1979, before the revolution, there were daily flights from Tel Aviv to Tehran. There were bilateral relations between both countries. We had a strong commitment, and it wasn't until the Shah was overthrown that, of course, that stopped. And it would be great, if I want to dream, like you dream about the Jets going to the postseason, I dream about something equally unrealistic. And I dream about being the first synagogue trip that visits Tehran. Moshe and I have talked about this. That in a reunified and liberated Iran, that we are one of the first synagogues to go and visit what can be. And every time I think that that's not a possibility, I think about our synagogue trip to the Emirates in Bahrain. I think about a trip we can take one day soon to Saudi Arabia. And I think about what can be. I have one last thing to say about this, which I think is the hardest thing for all of us to do. It's really hard, but we have to fight the temptation of doing a victory lap. First of all, 3 people died last night in Tel Aviv. My daughter called me at 4 o'clock in the morning, who is in Tel Aviv right now, who told me that she's being evacuated to the Dead Sea. Now, I never bring my phone with me on Shabbat. I did on 2 Shabbatot. I did on October 7th, and I did today. She told me that she was in a bomb shelter last night with her program and some friends, and that the bomb from Iran hit close enough that it blew the windows out of the bomb shelter. She is fine, thank God. All of her friends are fine, thank God. But it was a jarring moment for her. And frankly, I don't know how Dory and I were able to fall back asleep. But we did, because while we are anxious, we're not scared. We know that the country she's in loves her and she loves it, and they will protect her at all costs. But at the same time, if we put out our chests and figuratively wear our yarmulkes in pride again, with a moment of look what we did and look how we did it, look at our expertise and look at our strength and look how we infiltrated and look how we stopped this cancer from spreading to the world, I worry about that swagger. I worry about it because those who don't remember the past will be doomed to repeat it. And if you don't remember what happened after 67, it's called October 6, 1973. It's the Yom Kippur War. And there was a moment of invincibility that was around in Israel where the leadership and the IDF and Moshe Dayan and everyone else around said, no one would be dumb enough to attack us again. And if they did, we would decimate them. And until October 7th, 2023, October 6th, 1973 was the greatest military failure of the state. We will see. And for all of those that want to take a victory lap right now, for all of those that want to walk with a little swagger, I would tell you, do that swagger in front of Omer Nutra's parents, who are waiting for his body to come home so they can bury him in Israel and have a place to grieve and to mourn him. Do that little strut walk in front of Ziv and Gali Berman's grandmother, who has been holding the ingredients of their favorite dish in her kitchen fresh every single week so that when they are returned, she can make the schnitzel that they love and they don't have to wait more than an hour in the hospital for her to bring it. Do the strut then and there. I want to share a story with you that's one of my favorite stories of Jewish history that, again, is Munich and Entebbe. It is Haman and Esther and Mordechai. It's the story of Rabbi Shlomo Goren, who was first the chief rabbi of the IDF and later the first chief rabbi of the state of Israel. He was the chief rabbi during the Six-Day War. And on the third day of the Six-Day War, the Israeli army had conquered the old city, and Mata Gor says on the PA system for everyone to hear, it gives me chills even when I just repeat the words, Har Habayit Biyadenu, Har Habayit Biyadenu. The Temple Mount is in our hands. The Temple Mount is in our hands. A 2,000-year-old dream is now a reality. For 2,000 years, we dreamt of having a Western Wall and an old city reunified for the Jewish people. And here is a guy saying on the PA, it's no longer a dream. It is our reality. Har Habayit Biyadenu. Rabbi Shlomo Goren gathered all of the soldiers around near the old city, and just like the trumpets that were in Bahalotecha, he grabbed the shofar and he tried to blow it, but he was so overcome with emotion and the sanctity and miracle of the moment, he couldn't do it. So one of the men who was next to him played trumpet in the Philharmonic, and he grabbed it from him and he blew the shofar. And Shlomo Goren said, "Today is a holy day. We are reunifying Jerusalem for the first time in 2,000 years. Today, we will recite the Hallel prayers, which are the prayers you say on holidays, when there is a miraculous moment, when there's something special that happens in the world. There's no time in modern history that we add Hallel. But he was saying it is a time for Hallel." And then two soldiers, these were not generals, these were not colonels, these were corporals. These were low-ranking soldiers, said to Rabbi Goren, we're not davening Hallel today. And Goren said, "We are fulfilling a dream, a 2,000-year-old dream. We are standing at the Temple Mount. Yes, we're davening Hallel." And these soldiers said, "I spent the morning picking up the bodies of my family and friends so that you can stand here. They are in uniform, and we're going to bury them tomorrow. We should be saying Tachanun, which is a prayer of reflection and lamentation." And Goren stopped, and he paused, and he said, "No Tachanun and no Hallel." But they prayed. I think that story is potent because it tells us this is not a time for swagger, and it's not a time for wallowing. It's a time for us to stay focused. Because I worry about the swagger that was October 6, 2023, and I worry about the swagger that was October 5th, 1973. In the wake of moments of feeling invincible, that we cannot fall subject to again. If you ask me, what's happening now in Israel with Iran is nothing short of a miracle. And ironically, Yahya Sinwar probably said on October 8th and 9th that Allah was looking down on him. And now I think God is looking down on us. I do believe what's happening for us is a modern-day miracle. And I'm not quick and easy with giving out those miracle certificates. But I will tell you, we have the receipts that we paid for that miracle. And they were expensive. Really expensive. And I have seen oceans of tears from that miracle. Of mothers and fathers and grandparents, and a country that is still in agony because 54 of its own are not back home. So it's not a time for us to strut. It's not a time for us to wallow. It's a time for us to stay focused, to remember our past, and equally important, for us to remember our future. As we read in the parashah, God escorted the Israelites on their journey with a cloud of glory on this Shabbat, and for these next important days for our Israeli Defense Forces. May that cloud of glory oversee all of the citizens of Israel, all of those defending our homeland. May all of our hostages be released, and may we see this as the dawn of our peace and freedom now and forever. Ken Yehi Ratzon, may that be God's will. Let us say amen.